Hi, this is Joe Bonnier from Empower Athletic Development. In this video, I'm going to outline a system of training that I'm using once again for the second year with my high school athletes. I work in a small athletic development business primarily with high school and college preparatory type athletes during the school year. So in the summer, I have my college athletes throughout the year. It's mostly high school. Primarily softball and baseball. So I'm entering my busiest season, September through March, which leads up to their competitive season starting in April. This is the time, it's not only the busiest time for me, it's really the half of the year that gives me a chance to develop some long-term plan for my athletes. So last year, I read Triphasic Training by Cal Dietz and Ben Peterson in the summer, and I actually began to institute some of the principles and programming strategies to my athletes immediately, which doesn't sound like a great idea, but the benefits of this system made so much sense to me, and they actually made sense for different reasons. They were laid out in the book. Things just kind of popped out that weren't really directly mentioned, but seemed to make sense for my environment and for my business. And I'm going to go over those because they really didn't have anything to do, or they did, but it wasn't just about the morphological or the physiological benefits of this system of training or the way it's laid out. It made sense for the level of my athletes, for the coaching environment, and it made business sense as well. And hopefully I'll be able to define what that really meant to me. So as a review, if you're not familiar with the triphasic system, basically it's concentrated emphasis or blocks or phases of training dedicated to different muscular actions, logically sequenced, beginning with eccentric to isometric, and then concentric. For the details, the physiological benefits and rationale, you have to go to Cal and Ben's book. Pick that up. It's well worth the read. And do not become overwhelmed with like the advanced applications, different methods, the spreadsheets, because there's a lot of information in there. I took the basic principles, and again, the things that popped out made so much sense for my athletes who have very little training experience, and they go out of their way to reiterate that their system is really more appropriate for athletes with 2 to 3 years of training experience, and I 100% agree with that based on the examples and the programming strategies that they provide. Mine is a much more regressed version, but if you're in my situation and you have an athletic development business, high school athletes, underprepared, undertrained, not a lot of training experience, but they're competitive, hopefully I'm going to be able to convince you that it works. Beyond, again, the physiological or morphological changes that Cal lays out. Okay, so pretty much, I'm trying to give you the exact definition or examples of how this plays out. So it's not really theoretical. You can get a picture of how these programs are designed. Pretty much I'm going to dedicate 3 to 6 weeks per muscular action or per emphasis. All right, so we start with eccentric, we move to isometric, we move to concentric. So what does this look like? On a 3-day per week program, you're going to dedicate 1 to 2 exercises per day to emphasize that muscular action of the phase. All right, so if we're in our eccentric phase, and we take front squat, for example, or front squat, push-up, bench, those types of exercises work best. I'm going to also use it with rear foot elevated split squat. I'll go over the very limited exercise catalog that I use in a second here. You're just going to emphasize tempo, and tempo training has been around forever, but typically, if you're a coach and you kind of throw it out there on Facebook or one of these forums, and you're like, yeah, I'm getting back into tempo training, what do you coaches think about it? Pretty much coaches with a lot of experience and knowledge, anecdotal evidence, will say, we tried it, and for a variety of reasons, we move away from it. I don't really know why, but focusing on tempo does a lot of good things, if you're a coach and you're working with athletes in my situation. If you're in an eccentric phase, okay, so you're using a tempo such as 5-0 star, which, if you're not familiar, is just going to dictate that we're going to take 5 seconds on the eccentric phase of the lift, with 0 means no pause, and then star directs the athlete to push through the concentric phase as explosively as possible. You can use 3 seconds, 4 seconds, whatever you think is going to slow your athlete down. Okay, what we want to do is we want to make it very clear to the athlete that there's a phase of this lift or a portion of this lift that we need to slow down. What does this give us? This gives us time to coach, so they won't blow through the eccentric phase. And why is that important? Because, and as I'll say with the isometric as well, these are the 2 phases where things will go wrong when the intensity is increased later on in the training program. All right, so we're gonna eliminate, all right, those deficiencies later on in the program. We're gonna iron those out during these eccentric and isometric phases. All right, giving us time to coach is super important. If regardless of what your coaching style is, it gives us time to cue our athletes. Okay, So that's the, I mean, aside from the morphological changes that we're going to get, that again Cal lays out, the physiological benefits of developing eccentric strength before isometric and concentric are in this order, okay, we are now going to have more technically proficient athletes before we move on to more intense phases. This is very important. Okay, next, the isometric phase. Now, this is something that I kind of go against Cal. I'm not disobeying his orders. I just do it a little bit differently because based on my level of athlete, in general, you want to use the isometric, or as Cal recommends, you want to use isometric emphasis exercises in very sport-specific positions. You want to build up that isometric strength in very sport-specific positions. Okay, with my athletes who don't need to be there yet, all right, one thing I need to work on is teaching athletes like the concrete bottom of the exercise. Squats and bench and push-ups really being the ones that stick out, where athletes will tend to cheat, especially, again, later on in the program when we're testing, when, again, the intensity of the weight is increased. You spend 3, 4, 6 weeks slowing your athletes down, having them hold at the bottom of a lift. Okay, when they get to heavier weights, they're going to have control on the way down, they're going to hit bottom more consistently, they're going to have better control. Now, I say this, and as I'm going to get to the benefits, obviously you're going to have to use substantially lighter weight maybe than you would if you just kind of went 2 seconds down, 0 at the bottom, and then explosively up. 6 to 8 to 9 weeks into the program, you're going to be using lighter weights. But what's important to understand here is that there's such a broad spectrum of stimuli that work with young athletes. Okay, you can use body weight, you can use machines, you can use iso holds against a squat rack in various positions. And for young undertrained or low-trained athletes, they're going to develop strength pretty consistently, at a consistent rate. However, I don't think that necessarily means we're giving them the best foundation, all right, for the future. So this gives us the best combination, as I mentioned in the end, I'll reiterate at the end, gives us the best combination of both physical and technical proficiency. Okay? The time under tension is going to take care of itself. So we're not depriving them of building structural integrity with these slow tempos. We're also giving them a time to learn the exercises. Again, I'm talking about young athletes, 14 to 17, 14 to 18 years old with very little training experience. By the time they get to the concentric phases when weight increases, intensity increases, maybe 6 to 12 to 15 weeks into an off-season program, they're going to have really good command, and they're going to be as strong as if you used any other system. As you see on the right, I just use this little icon. It's time under tension, and up in these phases, time under tension is increased. Down here, it decreases because we're using heavier weights and lower volume. If I don't think I mentioned this, but in the isometric phase, your tempo might be a 2, a 3, and a star. Which again isn't exactly like the prototype triphasic training model, but with a beginner athlete, I'm never going to have them descend into a lift as fast as possible. So we're always going to use we're always going to have a dedicated 2. An honest 3-second hold in the bottom is a long time, and then they're going to accelerate out of it as fast as possible. In the concentric phase, now this is interesting, and this is something I continue to play around with. If I'm going to maintain my own integrity and consistency with the philosophy that I just kind of laid out there, I think there's something to slowing an athlete down during concentric training. I'm talking about, again, the first or second year of training. I don't like to see athletes bouncing a bar off their chest. I don't like to see athletes bouncing out of the hole in a squat, all right, and relying on their natural elasticity. Because, again, I'm working with baseball and softball, soccer and track, basketball athletes. They're naturally very elastic athletes. I don't have a lot of the sheer horsepower athletes like linemen and those types of athletes that need to build more elasticity. I have the genetically gifted elastic ones, under horsepowered ones who need to build concentric strength. There's something to putting the brakes on in those, again, compromising ranges of motion, slowing them down, and forcing them to express ownership that's really synonymous with strength in those bottom positions, instead of just allowing them to bounce out of it. There's going to be a time for that as we progress. So again, all we're really doing with the triphasic system for high school athletes is respecting tempo and sequencing it so they're prepared to take on heavier loads later on in a training program. Now, inevitably, everybody wants to know about loading parameters, volume, program design. All right, so I'm just going to throw out the most basic 3-day strength training portion of a program. All right, I have a very limited exercise catalog. That's another thing I forgot. When you're focusing on tempo, you don't need to change the lifts. And by the time you get to the end of the program, you're going to have very technically proficient athletes. I am not somebody who supports throwing new exercises at athletes to change it up or keep them entertained. I think that's a bad approach. I want to build ownership and command of the big rocks. So as you'll see, very, very limited exercise catalog here. Day one, we're going to have a lower body, we're going to have upper body pull, we're going to have upper body push and upper body pull. So typical day one might be a front squat, a push-up, and a pull-up. You can use a double kettlebell front squat. You can use a kettlebell dumbbell goblet squat to a box. You can use those weights. You can use those exercises and still emphasize this tempo. Because again, it's not just about the morphological or physiological changes. It's about making them technically proficient and giving yourself time to coach. Day one, front squat, push-up, pull-up. You can apply the tempo to the front squat and push-up. Day two, hex bar, deadlift, bench press, dumbbell row. You can mix the pressing exercises. I do a lot more push-up variations than benching exercises because I have softball and baseball athletes. But if you have a football or lacrosse athlete that doesn't have the contraindications for the upper body, you can do bench, 2 days of bench. It doesn't matter. If you're only doing 2 days, you can have a 2-day split. It works fine. Squats with tempo and eccentric squats suck. Okay, but if the athlete's willing to compromise on day one, they're going to get their green light day on day two. Deadlifts never take on the tempo. It's always kind of go day. Then day three, you'll see rear foot elevated split squat, pull up, barbell, RDL, push up. I have a medium intensity, medium volume day here, a higher intensity, lower volume day. This is my green light day. And then a higher volume, lower intensity day, my single leg exercise. We're going to do rear foot elevated split squat and a barbell or dumbbell RDL. Their hamstrings are going to be hanging all weekend. That's okay. Come Monday or Tuesday, they'll feel fine. You might have to arrange this somehow, adjust if you have athletes who are still competing in tournaments on the weekends. You might have to eliminate that and just focus on 2 days of the tempoed emphasis program, and then have kind of eccentric less training, sled pushes, floor presses, something like that on day three, so they're not too sore. So you have to be reasonable. All right. Whoa, that was a lot of information, but I hope this is all making sense. Sets and reps. Okay, we're not talking about a ton of volume here. I know if you are a trained athlete or coach, you have any kind of training experience, you are thinking right now that heavy eccentric training kills athletes. That's true for trained athletes who are going hard. For building technical proficiency, 3 to 4 sets of 4 to 5 reps is not going to crush your athletes for day two. And then the volume, yeah, you're going to be sore after rear foot elevated split squats, barbell, RDLs, or whatever you decide to do, RDLs and a reverse lunge to get more volume in on the lower body on day three. Doesn't matter. Okay, but this first day of eccentric or isometric, emphasized training is not going to kill them for their second day of training, which is going to be 2 to 4 days later. So you don't have to worry about that if you appropriately design the program. Just to summarize, I'm going to step down off my pedestal here. Again, the major benefits of this program or of this approach or appreciating tempo is that you give yourself time to coach. Okay, it makes your technique is good. It keeps athletes honest. This is synonymous with keeping weight appropriate. Okay, with girls, this is not really an issue because they stick to the program and they'll do what you say. But with boys, you just want to throw on plates and go for that extra 5 or 10 reps or go for that PR. Okay, that's when injuries happen. That's not necessary in their first or second year of training. That's not necessary ever, but you really want to reduce the chance early on and teach them good form and teach them honesty. It builds this program because of the way the time under tension is going to play out and the volume is going to play out. It's going to build structural integrity. So we're not going to assault those textbook principles, all right? It's by skipping to lower volume type training, but it's going to do that, and it's also going to build superior command in compromising positions, mainly the bottom of the squat and the bench press and the push-up. Okay, squat, bench, where we're most likely to get injured or just lose control in general, which is what we don't want to do, and I think that's the best combination. For more questions on how to apply this, just leave a comment or shoot me an email. I have no problem. I spoke so much, but hopefully I laid out the practical benefits of at least appreciating the system and not writing it off as an advanced system for highly trained athletes that you're never going to see.